Hi, this is Jeff Pospisil, the 10-Minute Treasurer with practical advice for improving your church's financial future. In this episode, it's entitled "Preaching on Giving is Not Like Peeing on an Electric Fence." Um, kind of what I decided to do is I decided to tithe my episodes basically. So every 10th one, I want to get into something a little bit more theological, a little bit more um, I don't want to say less practical, but it'd be more along the times if you were along the line if you're trying to teach or preach. What are the heart issues that have to go with this? So anyway, every 10th one I'm going to try to do something more along those lines. And this one it's preaching on giving is not like peeing on an electric fence. And you might ask, what in the world? I don't know. I've never peed on an electric fence, but I've touched an electric fence. And that was unpleasant. So I can imagine it's so much worse if you actually peed on one. But anyway, a lot of pastors treat talking about money or giving, or especially preaching about it, is about the worst thing you can possibly do. Again, kind of like peeing on an electric fence. There's it's just one of those things that you would never even think about doing, because what good could happen from it? Um, and a lot of churches, they would probably support the pastors avoiding the subject of giving while they're preaching. So, except for maybe the person who has to pay the bills, who wouldn't mind a little more income coming in. And pastors honestly have a good reason for avoiding. As Poor examples, this is oh gosh, Kenneth Copeland is who that is. Kenneth Copeland got a lot of bad rap for the private jets that his ministry uses. And I'm not trying to badmouth Kenneth Copeland. I'm sure his ministry has done a lot of good work, but he's just made the press in a bad way. And a lot of pastors, they don't, when they think if they start talking about money, they're going to be grouped in the same category as Kenneth Copeland and any of those other ones, the televangelist types. And people are just gonna see, oh, I knew he was just in it for the money, and that it would make people not take seriously all the other teachings. And the pastor is a major portion of the church's budget, and so there is that skepticism about what is the pastor's true intention. Um, but anyway, so there is a good reason to be nervous about preaching about money and about giving. But preachers who ever lived was Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ has preached some of the hardest messages or taught some of the hardest messages ever. This is the one about the story of the rich young ruler. And I don't know the Bible verse on this. I should, but I didn't look it up. Anyway, but basically, Jesus tells this guy, if you don't give everything you have, sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, you're probably going to hell. Uh, Basically, is what he says. And so that's pretty tough. And Jesus had a lot of other things to talk about money. He did not shy away from the subject. Um, he was very outright and are very straightforward about his teaching on faith and finances. And really, I sum it up in my own mind. Jesus, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So that's Luke chapter 12, verse 34. It's also Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. And this, some people read it like, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. But that's not what it says, and that might be true, but it's saying something a little different. It says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. In other words, where you're putting your treasure, your heart's going to start moving in that direction. Um, Money has a magnet in it. And so if you start let's say most people, they don't think about where they're putting their money, and they may not even think about doing anything good with it. So they're putting it into their house, and they're putting it into their stuff, and they're putting it into their hobbies, and that's where their heart's going. I mean, that's pulling their heart in that direction to where they care more about stuff. Or they're putting it in the bar, and then that's where they're caring about. But when a person starts giving, and even with the very first dollar, I believe, when they start giving to the work of Jesus Christ, and primarily that's through the church, that is when a person's heart starts moving in that direction, because that's where their treasure's going. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And just money has that effect. Jesus would also say that you can't have two masters. You know, you're going to love one and despise the other. And so money and God, you can't serve money and God, is what he says. And that really does drive it home that this is a major battle in people's hearts and in people's minds. And really the main thing that I try to teach people is generosity towards the work of Jesus Christ is what's going to break that pull of money. And people that start taking that step of faith to start giving like they feel led by Jesus Christ, that's what's going to make the biggest difference in their life and in their faith walk. Here's a picture from the cover of the book Pilgrim's Progress by Bunyan, and great book, you should read it. But basically the idea was the main character, Christian, he's carrying around this huge pack, and he's just always had that pack, and he didn't realize, you know, just how heavy it was until one day it came off of him. And that's how I think a lot of people feel when they start giving like they feel like they ought to. It opens up their world to a whole new feeling. I had an older gentleman in Yankton tell me about how 7 years ago he felt challenged by a sermon, and he decided to work his way towards tithing. You know, and here he was, I don't know how old he is, 70 or so, maybe 80. But anyway, he started working towards tithing, and now today he gives over a tithe. And the comments that he had was that he didn't know what he was missing out on. He had no idea what he was missing out on. This journey towards tithing was so amazing. What it did for his faith, he had no idea. And that's what a lot of people do. It just lifts your ability to trust God, to experience God's goodness. Because when you trust God, you can experience more of his goodness. And that's really when you neglect preaching about God, when you see it as something negative, like peeing on an electric fence, what you're doing is you're capping people's faith. You're going to cap them so they're going to experience God at only this base level instead of a much higher level. And yes, there will be people that complain about you talking about money, and it'll feel awkward. But I'm going to tell you what, it'll make such a difference in some people's lives, and then the lives that they touch as a result of that, I can't imagine people not taking this seriously just because of the huge difference it makes in people's lives. You're going to be taking that pack off of people's back. You're going to be drawing them so much closer to God. So that's all I have. Again, there's more resources at dakotasumc.org or dakotasumf.org. This is put on by the conference and the foundation, where we are all about Jesus' mission and connection, where we want to connect people like family into this great mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. All right, see you next time.